Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Mirror of Intimacy webinar. I'm Dr. Alexandra Katehakis, and today is Monday, April 4th, and our topic today is actions. I'd like to tell you a few things before we start. I want to remind you to type your questions into the Q&A box, and I'll answer them as we go along. And also, please leave us your book reviews or comments on Amazon for Mirror of Intimacy. Let us know what you love about the book. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the blue subscribe button below so you never miss a post. And if you like this, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. You can also keep up with what we're doing by following me on Instagram at Alex Katehakis and at Center for Healthy Sex. So our quote today is from Anne Dillard, and she writes, "How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. What we do with this hour and that one is what we are doing." And I really think that's a beautiful quote. And you probably know I like repeating the quotes and break them down. But how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. So how are you spending your days right now? We're just coming out of this pandemic, hopefully. And when we think back on the last 2 years and how we spent our days, the days just melded into days. And oftentimes people made reference to the movie Groundhog Day because it was the same day, day in and day out. And that was how we were spending our lives. And I think it's easier to see that when we're stopped, when we're not doing anything, when we're forced into this place of sitting still, if you will. And then she breaks it down into this: what we do with this hour and that one is what we are doing. What we do with this hour and that one is what we are doing. So what are we doing every day? This speaks to being present, I believe, to really being present with each and every hour of the day. And I always notice on Sundays how quickly the day goes by, how short an 8-hour span actually is. And then I think about what happens during the work week and how much gets crammed into that simple 8-hour day. And we actually become what we're doing. And we can start to become very small in the what of what we're doing because it doesn't really define all of who we are. It just becomes one aspect or one note of what we're doing. And so we start to outgrow people. We start to outgrow our jobs. We start to outgrow our clothes and places because what we do every hour is what we're doing. And the way we spend our days is what ends up being the way we spend our lives. So how does this relate then to the term action and actions? And when I think of the word action, I think about the director's call and the stage is perfectly set. The actors are in place, everything's ready to go. And everyone's awaiting the perfect scene to take place. But life is not like a movie, right? Life is not perfectly aligned and everything's in order before we take action in our lives and make things happen. In fact, when we're waiting for action, we can end up not doing anything. And there's a saying that perfection is the enemy of the good because we're waiting for some perfect scenario, some perfect person, some perfect marriage to take place. So by taking action and saying, okay, this is going to be good enough, then you can start to achieve some of your personal and professional goals. There's another saying that done is better than good. So just taking action, moving towards what those personal and professional goals are. And so take a moment right now, excuse me, to ask yourself, how am I spending all of my days? And what does every hour look like? And am I procrastinating on my personal and professional goals because I'm waiting for perfect? And what if today was the day? Today was the day to take action on whatever it is you've been putting off. Because moving towards something good and desirable really engages our life forces. We start to feel vital. We feel like we are engaged in our lives, that we're making things happen. And more importantly, that we're on purpose. What is the purpose of my life, and what action am I taking in order to move towards that purpose? Um, Actions that create healthy and genuine excitement are different from those that just create drama. So you want to consider that also. And drama can be a way to just sort of stir the pot or spin our wheels when we don't have a well thought out plan. So, what is the plan for your goals, for your hopes, and for your dreams? What actions are you taking towards those? Or are you just spinning your wheels and creating drama? And this can be especially true where sex and love are concerned, that you have to be both active and discerning when it comes to sex and love, because these are such powerful, powerful forces that you don't want to just throw yourself at anyone or lunge at a sexual act. Unless you're very clear that that's what you're doing. And if you're very clear, then you know what the consequences will be, and you're making a choice to deal with those consequences, good, bad, or otherwise. So when you are seeking someone or you're being sought after, these action states are driven by biological directives. They're nature's imperative that we bond, that we seek others, that we connect in a particular way. And so we want to be discerning about whether or not this is a true experience of love and wanting and desire versus one that is a repetition of some impulse control problem, perhaps, or doing the same thing over and over again, even though we end up in the same place. So that's where the discernment comes into place, that even though you might be driven by love, lust, limerence, the excitation of falling in love with someone, of desire, of wanting, is it true for you? Are you letting your intellect catch up with these actions that you're taking? Are you being discerning, in other words? Or are you just throwing caution to the wind, which may be an age-old pattern that you've had that always leaves you in an intense high, perhaps intense drama, and then alone again? So when your actions follow your intention towards your goals, then life starts to unfold with all of its possibilities. So intention, first of all, you have to have your attention on what it is you're seeking and set your intention for that. And then you have to take action. And those three things will move you towards what it is you say you want. So I want to remind you that if you have any questions or comments, to please type them into the chat box, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. So what precedes sexuality, of course, and love is courtship. And courtship also requires action. And courtship is a funny word because it sounds dated or old or even ancient in some ways. And courtship changes, from era to era. What used to be courtship, let's say in Elizabethan times, where two people were matched together and often there was a chaperone in the simplest of conversations. It was considered immodest to be in a room alone with someone of the opposite sex. And if you were same-sex attracted, you certainly had to do that in secret. Courtship today can look like pinging someone on a dating site, and then texting with them, and then maybe having a Zoom call and eventually a coffee date, to see if you're compatible enough to actually go on what we would consider more of a quote real date or traditional date. But this all requires action regardless of what your standard of courtship is. And oftentimes one person is complaining that the other person isn't initiating the courtship fast enough, like he or she or they don't call, or something along those lines. And then once people get into relationship, there can be complaints about who's initiating sex and why one person initiates and the other doesn't. But I want to really impress upon everyone and all of us that sex is not only initiated genitally, that this is an old construct of sex and sexuality, that sex can be transmitted through a gaze, a simple look across the room, the tone of voice because it's the intention that moves things into action, not the final action itself. There are all these small measures and steps that have to be taken in order to get us into our preferred state or preferred goal. So think about any large endeavor. Sex is a smaller endeavor, but a larger endeavor like a career path or going to college, or deciding to get a higher education. You don't just decide you're going to go and get a bachelor's degree and then boom, you have one. You have to go through so many small steps, from the application process. Just that has 100 steps in it by itself. And then the acceptance process, and then the matriculation process. It just goes on and on and on before you get to the final graduation. So keep in mind that these small things that we do on a day in and day out basis are the ways that we are engaging in courtship with our partners. The glance, the look, the smile, the funny things we say, the pet names we have for each other. So it's not just about a genital grab and then you're having sex all of a sudden. And in addition to sex, engaging your partner in any kind of planned activity is important. It doesn't matter whether it's a date, like you're actually maybe going to the theater again, or you're going for a hike in the woods or a walk on the beach. But those actions demonstrate your intention that you are interested, that you want your partner to want you also. There's a mutuality in this kind of courtship that requires work and discipline in order to move towards what it is you want. So it's through our intention and the rich actions that we take every single day, the gratitude that we have for our partners, that others know that we love them. And this would be true for your children also, or your perhaps aging parents, that these are not one and done propositions, that these are day in and day out actions. And relationships require a lot of intentionality, a lot of intention. We've talked about, I meant to say attention. We've talked a lot about the metaphor of a garden. You can't just plant a garden and walk away from it. You have to tend to it. You have to weed it and water it and check on it and fertilize it and make sure the dead leaves are taken off. You've got to spend a lot of time cultivating and shaping that garden, just the way we have to cultivate and shape our loves. We have to let people know that we're attracted to them, that they matter to us, that we care about them by showing up. And there is the adage that we should all live by, that actions speak louder than words. And that's a really important statement. The way that we forgive someone if they've hurt us is by watching their actions. When people change, that's when we can forgive them. So these actions are essential in order for us to be able to have trust and safety and a sense of belonging and caring for the people around us. So if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box so we can have a dialogue if any of this rings true for you, or you are struggling with something. So again, remember, it's not what you say, but what you do and why you do it. That's important also. You can't just do it out of obligation or doing it with an internal eye rolling, because if you don't do it for the right reason, then your partner's going to know that it's not for the right reason. It's like if you agree to do something that you're not that interested or excited about doing, with your family or your partner or a date, and you do it anyway, but you go with an attitude, or you're pouting, or you're feeling like a victim or resentful, that doesn't count. You just shouldn't go if you're going to go that way. If you say yes, then you have to go with an open heart and an open spirit and an openness to the possibility that you're going to have fun in spite of yourself, even though you're not that into whatever the thing is, whether it's a party or gathering with family, or a sport or activity that you don't particularly like. So those actions are what move things forward in any relationship. And reality doesn't always conform to what we want and what we need, but wrongly believing that you can just think it into conformity will definitely frustrate you. So if your life is lacking something, then you got to accept that reality. You've got to be in the reality of today. Today, and I'm back to the quote now, that what I'm doing today is who I am, and how I spend every hour shapes who I am. And if I don't like that, I can't bend things to my will. I can't just say that I'm not going to be at work every day and everybody can just do their job and life will run without me. That's really naive thinking, actually. If I want to shift and change things in that way, then I have to spend a lot of time molding and crafting and shifting the way things work so that I can make that happen. So if your life is lacking what you consider good or goodness, then you have to be in that reality, and you have to accept that reality, and then you have to start working on incremental changes. Somebody has a question here in the chat. What does it mean when you feel so unmotivated to even move things into action? Well, I would say you might want to seriously consider that you're depressed. If somebody is so unmotivated that they can't move things, that's generally not a good sign. Because I think what I'm pointing to is that it's easy to get overwhelmed and think, let's just take graduate school for an example. I want to go back to school, and oh my God, that's so overwhelming. Where am I going to go to school? What do I want to study? Where am I going to get the money? That can just be paralyzing. So to be able to stop and say, okay, I have a love for learning. That's what I know. So if I have a love for learning, maybe I'll start looking at a bunch of online catalogs at schools in the part of the country I want to live in to see what might interest me. Okay, so that's what I mean about starting to break things down into small, small steps. But if you can't even take those small steps, then you want to seek professional help to see if your mental health is fit and if maybe you're depressed and you need help in that way. So I just want to remind everyone to thank you for joining me on this webinar on actions. So if you take intentional action to change things, then things will definitely start to change for you. Someone writes here, my husband is a sex addict and also has ADHD, and we've been married coming on 24 years now. It's only the past 2 years that he's actually had a sponsor, is working with a therapist. I've been trying to work with him on the relationship. I feel that addiction was work that was thrust on me. He wants me to do work with him on his ADHD. Medication was suggested. He refuses. So I think you should take this question up with one of your therapists, because it sounds like there are a lot of layers to it and there's complexity to it. Your husband is asking for assistance and help with really a brain structural problem that he has. And it's easy to help people who help themselves. So if he is doing what he can to help himself, whether it's medication, there are some great ADHD coaches out there. There are systems that people can put into place to really help them start to function better. And as a partner of someone who has ADHD, you have to adapt to that. And clearly you've been living with it for 24 years, so you're not unfamiliar with what the patterns are. So what can you assist with? What can you not assist with? How much work does he need to do? These are the places where we can get really resentful about who we married, because we never know who we marry until we marry them. And it's once we marry somebody and we live with them that we start to learn more about who they are. And by the way, they learn more about who we are. And we also learn who we are in relationship to the people that we're married to. So nobody is perfect and everybody has their issues. And we choose the people we choose to work out whatever issues we need to work out. So we have to get clarity about all of that, and then start to look at the dynamic in the marriage and what is my part in it and what is his part in it, and where can I make some shifts and changes, and where does he have to make shifts and changes? And we might meet in the middle. Sometimes we don't always. Sometimes there are areas that we just can't cross. And we either choose to live with that or we choose to leave. So these are complicated questions for sure. But I want to encourage you to look at what you can do and what you can't do or really don't want to do, and to be honest about that. Someone writes, I've been thinking a lot about death. I'm 47 years old, and since July, I've been pondering, wow, my life is more than halfway over. Is it possible that my job is so joyless and painful that I feel I'm wasting away? I'm more than likely quitting shortly, and I don't have a new job lined up. I also plan on moving to Europe for 1 year. Well, I would say, congratulations to you for figuring that out, because yes, life is happening right now. Life is what we're doing now. And if you feel like you're in a job that is joyless and it's a grind, and you have the ability, meaning you have enough money saved that you can take a year off at 47 years old, that's fantastic. Because there are sort of experts in the longevity field and the human potential field that say that, the third chapter of our life, if we're lucky, begins at 60. Because people are living into their 90s today. We have so much more technology with health and making ourselves available to have a quality of life as we age. So our mental health, our physical health, and well-being are crucial to these longevity propositions. And if you can just take a gap year, is what it sounds like you're doing, Lita, just take a gap year and just wander and see and ask the question, who am I? David White, the poet, has this beautiful saying that we're always meeting the person we're becoming. We're always meeting the person we're becoming because we're always becoming someone new. And this ties to our topic of actions, that we're not stagnant. We're not just sitting around. And if we are, we really have to look at that quote again about we are what we're doing. And we have to pay attention to what we're doing and ask this incredibly difficult question of, what do I want? What do I want for my life? What have I done in my life? And that's actually something I've been thinking about a lot, is all the things that I have done in my life that some of which I don't even remember. What was I doing in my 20s? And what was I doing in my 30s again? And what choices did I make? And what people touched my life? And what incredible experiences did I have? And I think it's worthwhile to start to journal this. And I would recommend that for you, Lita, to start to write out everything you have done. So then I think when we look at what we have done and the experiences we have had, then we can start to look at what we haven't done and the experiences we haven't had that we would like to have, and then start to shape our lives around that. So thank you for that beautiful share from you. I think it's really inspiring and very courageous for you to say, that's it. I'm going to leave this dead end job and I'm going to strike out into the world. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm open. Let's see. Someone's saying that they're in a partnership with someone who continues to lie and hold secrets. And he can have the intention of wanting to be honest and still not take action. Yes, because we can have the intention of being honest, but if we don't start practicing honesty every day, we won't be honest. So there's that old saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Intentions are nothing without action. So what is your intention? Where is your attention? Is your attention every day on getting better, on telling the truth? And what actions are you taking to make that happen? Actions would be things like, going to therapy, reading books about honesty, going to 12-step meetings, working a program, spending, 20 hours a week focused and working on that particular problem. Yes, Lita says that this is a scary decision. It sounds like a terrifying decision, but what's more terrifying? Dying at that desk, like waking up when you're 60 and you're still at that desk miserable, or going to Europe and having some unbelievably fun experiences? seeing things you've never seen before, tasting foods you've never tasted before, having experiences with people you never in a million years would have had before. And you're still young. 47 is still really young. So I look forward to hearing how you do on that. Okay, Sandy says, I'm 49 years old and have recently been diagnosed with having adult ADHD. I struggle with taking the first steps when engaging in something new. What are some good strategies to help with task initiation? Boy, you know, Sandy, I'm not an expert on ADHD, and it's amazing that it's taken this long for you to get that diagnosis. But I do want to encourage you to look up ADHD coaches. There are people that specialize exactly in helping people with this problem. And I think I know a couple of ADHD coaches, but I can't think of their names and who they are right now. There's someone on the East Coast that we refer to here and someone here in Santa Monica. So you can always call our intake line and ask for resources for that. But you can also Google in your area. You know, ADHD coaches. And there are also great workbooks online that you can find on Amazon for ADHD and how to help with specifically those kind of problems. Can you speak about a goal such as weight loss? I'm at a healthy weight, but I struggle with emotional overeating and feel like I sabotage myself and the life I want to. Well, I'm not an expert on compulsive overeating any more than I am on ADHD, but these things often have co-occurring addictive issues. And a compulsive overeating seems just incredibly challenging to me because it's such a brain body situation that the brain is not reading signals of satiation. And whenever a person is upset, they reach for food, they don't reach for other people, they don't journal, they don't go for a walk, they don't take contrary action. So, again, you might do really well with maybe a 12-step program like Overeaters Anonymous. So, you have a community of concern, you have people that you can reach out to that you're held accountable to that can also help you with your dietary needs. Let's see, how do you re-engage in sexual contact when your partner has sexual dysfunction? You desire closeness, he's embarrassed, the marriage is 45 years old, he's in recovery. I don't think it's about you becoming his arousal template. These are couple therapy questions that you have between the two of you. I would say his erectile dysfunction is most likely tied to the dynamics in the relationship, his shame, his embarrassment, perhaps even where your difficulties line up with his. I don't know what they are. So these are really important that you find a couples therapist that can help you with these kind of issues. These are second stage recovery issues. So it's not about you becoming his arousal template or you trying to look more pornographic or you. There's nothing wrong with you. This has to do with the dynamic between the two of you. And so it's a less interest about the problem that you're having with sex versus the two of you talking about the kind of sex life you would like to have. We also offer an online coaching class here based on my workbook, Sexual Reflections, that might help the two of you. And that's a course the two of you would take together. And always you can call our intake line at 310-843-9902 to get these questions answered. Bonnie writes, my friend says life is not a dress rehearsal. Yes, I've heard that phrase before. I just started my third trimester of life at 60 and just quit my 8-to-5 job and got my master's degree in organizational psychology. Sounds like you're doing amazing things, Bonnie. But no matter how clear I think I am on the steps to start a new work dynamic of consulting, I hit barriers. Also, in my long distance romantic relationship, although we have fantastic communication, the barriers to our desire seem to always be rearing their heads. Any tips on how to overcome these barriers? Well, I don't know what these barriers are for you. Like, what is it that stands in your way? And it may be useful for you to write those things out for yourself also. What gets in the way now? It sounds like you've got a new career going. but that you're having a difficult time launching it. And again, this is sometimes where coaching comes into play, where if you find a really great coach that can help you get your consulting practice going, that may be what you need to get motivated. And, as far as a long distance relationship, I don't know what the barriers are to desire other than maybe you're not in the same room. But if you are in the same room and you're having desire issues, then you need to have a conversation about what those are, because desire creates anticipation. And without anticipation, anticipation creates desire. And without anticipation, it's hard to have desire. So how do the two of you talk to you? In what ways you take action to stoke that anticipation? Those are some of the things I was talking about at the top of this hour, that we have to be present in every hour of our life, and the ways that we treat our loved ones in order to stoke that anticipatory desire. Do you have any suggestions to those of us who have difficulties with making decisions so we can start moving into action and intention? I've spent so long attending to others' needs as my day-to-day activity that I have a hard time deciding what is next. Also, healing from a 30-year marriage to a sex addict, I'm shocked into living my own life. I'm also working with him for the past 3 years. So, yes, it can be a big shock into living your own life. And many times partners of sex addicts don't want to leave because they don't, the terror of facing their lives after 35, 40 years is bigger than the terror of staying in a marriage where they're unhappy. And so I would recommend just what little you said about, you've spent so much time, focusing on other people's lives, that it's really great to look at the codependency literature. I've found it so incredibly helpful in my own life. One of my favorite books is Melody Beattie's book, The Language of Letting Go, which is just a simple reader, a daily reader, that helps you get courage, that helps you start to take action in your life, that doesn't make you feel guilty for being angry or taking care of yourself or doing what you need to do for yourself. And just to be clear, I think of codependency as a trauma reaction. It's an adaptive strategy to growing up in a household where a child couldn't get their needs met, that they had to take care of the adults in order to feel safe sometimes. So anything you can do to counteract that. And then also there are action boards that people can create by getting a big piece of poster board and writing down what it is you want to do in one column. And in the next column, what are the obstacles to getting that thing done? And in the third column, what are the negative things you tell yourself about it? And then the fourth column would be, what one thing can you do today or this week to move into action, whether it's make one phone call or send an email or make a business card or start to find a coach that can help you get through whatever problems you're facing. Because sometimes when somebody is depressed and they can't take action and they can't move, psychotherapy is certainly indicated. But other times it may not be a psychotherapeutic issue. It may just be that you need a good coach, someone who's going to hold you accountable, who's going to challenge your negative thoughts, who's going to get you into action with a workbook, and who's going to have you make a plan so you can start to build your business or move out of the house you've been living in for 30 years that you don't want to be in anymore, or get divorced, or whatever the action is, or plan to take a trip. We all need assistance with all of these things. There's nothing wrong or abnormal about any of it. That's why we really, really need community, and to not be isolated. Recommending a good resource for introduction: First Touching After 2 years of in-house separation after formal disclosure. Well, I would turn your attention to my book, Erotic Intelligence. And then after that, to read the couples intimacy book of intimacy. Melissa, maybe you can put that in the chat box. It's the book by the Burkhaws, because they have a lot of exercises in that book for trust building. So you can start there. So someone's asking about, the difference between codependence and prodependence, and I think they are both useful, honestly. I don't think it's worth throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think the codependency notions, when you look at codependency as a trauma reaction from childhood, it 100% makes good sense. When children grow up in alcoholic or abusive or violent or neglectful families, they learn how to be codependent to survive. It's not dirty or wrong, it's a survival skill. And then as we get older, our tendency is to caretake to the people around us to make sure we're safe. And these are maladaptive strategies. Now, when you're married to someone who's an addict and who's in recovery, of course you want to help them. Of course you love them. Of course you are going to do what you can as an intimate team to assist that person into getting well and for the two of you to get well together. So I don't think that's an either or question. I really think it's both and. And Sarah says, do you have some suggestions on building trust? What kind of actions promote trust after it has been broken? Well, building trust and safety takes a very long time. And that goes back to actions speak louder than words. It goes back to forgiveness happens when change happens. So all you can do is watch the behavior of your partner. Does that person show up the way they say they're going to? Do they keep their commitments? Are they present? Are they doing what they need to do to get better every single day? And it takes a long time. If somebody's been sick for 20, 30 years, 40 years, if they can start to make changes in a year or two or five, that's pretty remarkable. But it's not going to happen overnight, that's for sure. So you really have to watch what the person's doing and what their actions are. And that's the beginning of rebuilding trust. Certainly, there are trust building exercises people can do, but that's something that typically happens in couples therapy or with particular books on that topic. So thank you all for that. So let's look at our daily sex acts today. So we're asking that you take an active step towards your partner today. Maybe it's time that you initiated sex, or you made plans for the evening, or maybe it's time to process or propose deeper connection, or process things that haven't been talked about. I mean, the number one killer of intimacy, and I'm talking about sexual intimacy and connection, are resentments. That if you are not current on your resentments every single day, you don't get things off your chest, you don't talk about things, and you don't also express your appreciations every single day, you're going to have trouble with this kind of connection. So you have to be honest with yourself. Is this relationship working? Am I hanging on for dear life? Am I hoping against hope? Where have I made the relationship too small for me by blaming or shaming my partner? What is the work I need to do on my end? Or is it time for me to end things? Is it time to go? And no one can answer that question but you. That's a very, very difficult question to answer because relationships are so complicated and it's so difficult to put so much of our life on hold for so long, and then to realize maybe that we didn't make a good investment or that didn't go so well. And I just have to cut my losses and move on and look forward to the rest of my life, not be stuck in lamenting or being angry or bitter about the back end of my life, because that is a zero-sum game. There's nothing we can do about what woulda, coulda, should have been. All we can do is learn from it, pick ourselves up, and move on and do something different the next time. So be honest with yourself about the reality of your life today. Instead of fighting what is, choose to see the depth of what you have. Be grateful for the partner that you do have. Make genuine intentions and then take action to create those needed changes. So when I think about my life today and the extreme level of privilege I have to be sitting here talking to you, There are no bombs going off outside of my window. I have food to eat. I have money to go buy myself a cup of coffee if I want to. I can drive my car in peace. We have the freedom of speech to be even having a conversation about sex and sexuality right now. The list of gratitude goes on and on and on, even in the midst of a marriage that feels bad or broken or painful or dangerous. We have options all the time. And so we have to really get clear with ourselves about the actions we have to take and not collapse into a place of being a victim. And that's also tricky because when we've been victimized, we're victims. But for how long do we stay in that victim place? For how long do we lament what happened to us? And when do we really start to pick ourselves up? And I'll tell you, the people to look to for this are people like in Special Olympics, people who have lost limbs or suffered just grave accidents and have disabilities. Those people don't want to be thought of as victims in general. Those people prevail, and they show us that prevailing when they get out there and, run marathons or play basketball in wheelchairs or any number of other things disabled people do. So if you're able-bodied, I want you to really challenge yourself today about the life you're living and the actions you're taking or not taking, and what one thing can you do today to harmonize with the flow of your life? What one thing can you do to harmonize with the flow of your life? And even if the flow of your life feels terrible today, if it feels like there's no flow, how do you let yourself be with that and say, okay, my marriage is miserable. I'm so sad and so angry and so hurt. And I'm just going to let myself be that today and stop acting like I'm not, or making other people miserable because I am, and start to get really clear with myself about what I need and what I want and what I'm tolerating. And then how do you harmonize with the other people that you're in relationship with? Your partner, your lover, your child, your mother, your father, your boss. Who else do you need to harmonize with today and stop resisting and fighting against? And if you're resisting and fighting against it, it may be that you're holding a resentment and you're too afraid to take the action of having a difficult conversation. So every day we have to take these actions, and it's easier to run away or sometimes put our head in the sand than it is to face these things head on. And I want to use Lita today as someone who's courageously facing this head on. She's leaving her job and she's going to buy a ticket and go to Europe. And that's not necessarily the answer to all of her issues and life problems, but is definitely taking an action and not sitting in the place of being a victim. How do you get past the hurt when your partner has had a long-term emotional affair and heavy sexual fantasy? Well, that's your question. How do you get past that hurt? Do you trust the person that you're with, that they are going to make reparations to you, that they are going to live a life of amends? Because amends are not apologies, they're lifelong strategies for making up for the hurt. And are you going to lick your own wounds and heal yourself? Are you going to let that person, that emotional affair, destroy you? Or are you going to say that was a fantasy world that he was living in with some woman who wasn't well either? And I'm not going to let that diminish me and who I am as a human being. And I'm going to take care of myself and make myself emotionally and physically healthy and happy. And then either my partner comes along with that or he doesn't. But if he doesn't, that's not about me, that's about him. So that's the best way I know for you to get past that hurt, is to put your attention on yourself and take action to heal yourself. So I hope you all have a beautiful April as we face holidays of Passover and Easter. The beginning, spring is about beginning. It's about spring cleaning, which is a form of taking action. So what do you need to clean up? What are you tolerating? What do you need to get rid of? What do you need to donate, pass on, leave behind, so that you, like the flowers that blossom in May, can start to see a new you as we move into these warmer months. So I hope you have a beautiful April, and I look forward to seeing you in May.